I didn't think it was a scam because nothing about it was exciting. The email subject line was plain. Short-term contract inquiry. No company logo. No branding. The sender used a normal name, not a handle. The message was brief and professional. They said they found my resume through a staffing database I barely remembered signing up for years ago. They were looking for a temporary backup. That was the exact word they used. Backup. Not assistant. Not replacement. Not stand-in. Backup. The pay was good. Too good for the amount of work described, but not so good that it felt criminal. Hourly, paid weekly, remote, with occasional in-person availability. No overtime. No benefits. No long-term promise. When I asked what I'd actually be doing, they replied within minutes. Nothing, most of the time. I should have stopped there. I know that now. But at the time, I was tired. I was between contracts. I had student loans and a rent increase coming. I told myself boring money was better than stressful money. We scheduled a video call. The person on the screen didn't introduce themselves with a title. Just a first name. Middle-aged. Neutral face. The kind of person who looked like they'd learned how to appear forgettable on purpose. They explained the role carefully, like they'd practiced. I would be assigned to one individual, a private citizen. My job was to mirror their daily routine as closely as possible. Same sleep schedule, same meals within reason, same general movements throughout the day. I wouldn't interact with them. I wouldn't contact them. I wouldn't interfere with their life in any way. I was there in case of interruption. I asked what kind of interruption. They paused. Not dramatically, just long enough to feel deliberate. Temporary unavailability, they said. I asked if this was medical, like an emergency contact thing. They said no. I asked if it was security related. They said no again. I asked if the person knew about me. Another pause. No, they said. They don't need to. That should have been the end of it. But then they added something that felt strangely reassuring at the time. You won't be replacing them. You're only a backup. They still exist. They said it like people say, the plane is safe, or this procedure is routine. I didn't understand why that sentence mattered until much later. The onboarding process was fast. No paperwork beyond a generic contract and a non-disclosure agreement that was aggressively vague. No company name at the top. Just a legal entity I couldn't find much about online. That didn't bother me as much as it should have. They gave me a start date. The next Monday. Sunday night I received a file. It was labeled with a first name. Not mine. Inside was a daily schedule broken down into 15-minute blocks. Wake time. Shower duration. Toothbrushing. Breakfast composition. Commute window. Work posture. Lunch timing. Even restroom breaks were loosely noted, though not in detail. It felt invasive just reading it. There were notes in the margins. Prefers silence here. Avoid caffeine after this point. Mild back pain if seated longer than 90 minutes. This wasn't a template. It was a person. At the bottom of the file was a single line. Begin synchronization immediately. I woke up the next morning at the listed time. It felt stupid, honestly. Standing in my own kitchen, eating a breakfast I didn't normally eat, at a pace that didn't feel natural to me. I kept checking the clock, adjusting myself to stay on schedule. I worked from my laptop, sitting upright, hands placed as instructed. I avoided music, avoided podcasts, avoided distractions that weren't listed in the document. Every time I drifted, I felt a small pulse of anxiety, like I was doing something wrong even though no one was watching. Around noon, I got my first message. Good. Continue. No explanation of how they knew. That was the first unsettling detail, but I ignored it. I told myself it was probably based on activity logs or something similar. Remote work software does that all the time. By the second day, the routine started to feel less like copying and more like surrendering. I caught myself anticipating things before checking the schedule. Feeling hungry exactly when the document said I would. Getting tired at the specified minute. I adjusted my grocery list to match theirs. I rearranged my furniture slightly because the notes mentioned clear line of sight from seating position. I told myself I was being thorough, professional. On the third day, I noticed something new in the file. A section titled Contingency Behavior. It was short. If subject becomes unavailable, backup will continue uninterrupted. Do not deviate. Do not announce change. That phrasing stuck with me. Do not announce change. To who? I asked my contact for clarification. I kept the tone casual. What exactly does unavailable mean in practice? The response came slower this time. Not something you need to plan for, they wrote. If it happens, you will be informed. That night I did something I hadn't done yet. I searched the name on the file. It wasn't a unique name. There were dozens of results. Social media profiles, a LinkedIn page, a few old photos. The person lived in the same city as me, same general neighborhood. That coincidence made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't fully explain. On Thursday, I was instructed to leave my apartment for the first time. The schedule included a short walk, a very specific route, turn-by-turn directions, same pace, same pauses. I followed it. Halfway through the walk, I had a sudden irrational thought that I was walking slightly wrong, that my stride didn't match, that my breathing was off. I slowed down. That's when I saw him. I didn't recognize him at first, not consciously, just a vague sense of familiarity that made my attention lock onto him. He was walking toward me from the opposite direction. Same pace, same posture, same distracted neutral expression I'd seen in the mirror all week. When we passed each other, neither of us reacted. But as he went by, I noticed something that made my chest go cold. He glanced down at his wrist. At the exact moment my phone vibrated in my pocket. The message was a single sentence. Synchronization confirmed. I finished the walk. I went home. I followed the rest of the schedule exactly. That night, lying in bed at the assigned time, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the sentence they'd used in the interview. You won't be replacing them. You're only a backup. They still exist. I realized I didn't know what would happen if that stopped being true. I slept poorly, but not because of fear. It was more like my body didn't trust rest anymore. Every time I drifted off, I had the vague sense that I was about to miss something important. An appointment, a signal, a deviation. I woke up 30 seconds before the scheduled alarm. That bothered me more than the encounter on the street. I didn't rush for the file anymore. I already knew what came next. Shower length, water temperature, toothbrush pressure. I caught myself adjusting details that weren't written down, like the angle of the mirror or the way I dried my hands, just because it felt closer to what I imagined the other person would do. That assumption slipped in quietly. Not what the schedule said, but what he would do. I corrected myself and stuck to the document. Mid-morning, a new note appeared in the shared file. No notification. It was just there. Minor desynchronization detected yesterday at 14:42. Corrected. I checked the time. That was right after I'd passed him on the sidewalk. I scrolled back through the day, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. My pace had been right. My posture matched. My phone usage had been 0, as instructed. I realized then that I didn't actually know what synchronization meant. I assumed it meant timing, but maybe it was more than that. Around noon, my phone rang. It wasn't my contact. It was an unfamiliar number. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered. There was breathing on the other end, slow, even, like someone holding the phone but not speaking yet. "Hello?" I said. A pause. Then the call ended. I checked the number. No voicemail, no follow-up. A minute later, a message came through the work channel. Do not answer unknown calls during active hours. I stared at the screen. I didn't know that was part of the protocol, I typed back. It is now, they replied. The rest of the day passed without incident, but something had shifted. Before, the routine felt like imitation. Now it felt like supervision. I became aware of my own movements in a way I hadn't since childhood, like when you're trying to act normal in front of adults. I monitored my expressions, my tone, even though no one could hear me. I avoided standing still for too long because the schedule rarely allowed for inactivity. In the evening, the file updated again. A new section appeared beneath contingency behavior. Environmental matching. It listed small things. Lighting temperature. Noise floor. Preferred seating distance from walls. Even ambient smells. I laughed once out loud at how absurd it was. Then I stopped because laughter wasn't on the schedule. I followed the instructions. I changed the bulbs in my living room. I turned off appliances I didn't need. I opened a window for exactly 7 minutes because the notes mentioned air circulation improves focus. By the time I went to bed, my apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a replica built from memory. On Friday, I received an address. It wasn't labeled as mandatory, just optional familiarization. The address was less than a mile away. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was just research, that knowing more would make things feel less strange. I walked there during the approved window. The building was unremarkable. Mid-rise. Clean. Secure entry. The kind of place you forget as soon as you leave. I stood across the street longer than necessary, pretending to check my phone. Nothing happened. No one came out. No one went in. I felt ridiculous and started to leave. That's when I noticed the light. 3rd floor. 1 window. Same time the schedule listed as rest period. The curtain was half drawn. I didn't see his face, just a silhouette seated in a chair, angled slightly away from the window. My phone vibrated. Familiarization complete, the message read. I didn't reply. I went home and sat exactly where the schedule said I should sit. For the first time since starting the job, I deliberately broke the routine. I leaned back instead of forward. Nothing happened. No message. No correction. I waited. Still nothing. A small, reckless sense of relief spread through me, like I'd found a crack in something solid. Then my phone buzzed. Posture adjustment required, the message said. Back support engaged. I straightened instantly. My heart was pounding harder than the situation deserved, but I couldn't calm it down. My mind kept replaying the call, the breathing, the silence. That night, as I lay in bed, I noticed a new detail in the schedule for the following day. A block labeled simply, observation. No instructions. No location. Just a time range. I didn't sleep at all after that. Saturday morning, I followed the routine with mechanical precision. I didn't improvise. I didn't test boundaries. I moved like a component in a system I no longer understood. When the observation window arrived, nothing obvious happened. No messages. No calls. I sat. I waited. Then, faintly, I heard footsteps outside my apartment door. They stopped directly in front of it. I held my breath. No knock. No handle turn. Just presence. After a full minute, my phone vibrated. Observation complete. The footsteps moved away. I didn't check the peephole. I didn't open the door. I stayed exactly where I was until the next scheduled activity. By Sunday, I had stopped thinking of the other person as a stranger. He had become a reference point, a fixed original, and I had started to feel in small, unsettling ways like a draft copy. That afternoon, I noticed something that made my hands go cold. The schedule for the upcoming week had changed. My name had been removed from the header, replaced with his. No explanation. No comment. Just a quiet edit, like it had always been that way. I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide whether this meant I was being promoted or erased. I was still staring when a new message arrived. Please confirm readiness for escalation. I didn't know what escalation meant, but my fingers typed confirmed before I could stop them. A second later, another message appeared. Good, it said. Backup integrity is stable. That night, lying in the dark at the assigned hour, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. I wasn't copying him anymore. I was being calibrated. And whatever this system was preparing for, it wasn't interested in the difference between us. The escalation started quietly. There was no announcement, no shift change, no moment where someone told me things were about to get worse. The schedule just became denser. The margins filled up. The gaps disappeared. Every minute accounted for. I woke up Monday morning already exhausted, even though I had technically slept the required number of hours. My dreams were shallow and fragmented, like my brain was afraid to commit to anything deeper. The first new instruction appeared at 8:10. Vocal calibration. I frowned at the screen. There had been no speaking requirements before. Silence had been preferred. A few seconds later, my phone rang. The same unknown number as before. I stared at it, my pulse loud in my ears. I answered. "Hello," I said. The voice on the other end was mine. Not similar. Not close. Mine. Same cadence. Same slight rasp on the second syllable. Same breath pattern between words. "I'm just testing the line," the voice said. I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry, my tongue heavy. There was a brief pause, then the voice continued, still calm, still me. "Say the word Monday." I swallowed. "Monday." A half-second later, the voice repeated it. Perfectly. Even the tiny hesitation before the day. "Again," it said. I did. Again, the echo. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it like that might change something. "Good," the voice said. "Latency is within tolerance." The call ended. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, trying to find a rational explanation that didn't make my stomach twist. Voice matching software existed. Deepfake audio wasn't new. I knew that. But this wasn't a recording. It responded. It adjusted. It waited for me. I checked the schedule. Vocal calibration, complete. The rest of the day unfolded with a new layer of tension. Every time I breathed, I wondered if it was being measured. Every time I shifted in my chair, I imagined a graph adjusting somewhere. In the afternoon, I received a message I hadn't seen before. Primary subject status unchanged. That word again. Primary. If there was a primary, then I wasn't just a backup. I was a secondary. That evening, during the walk, I saw him again. This time, he was sitting on a bench along the route, exactly where the schedule listed a brief rest. I almost missed him. My brain tried to slide past the recognition, like it had done before. He looked tired. That was the first real difference I noticed. Dark circles under his eyes. His shoulders slightly slumped. His hands clasped loosely in his lap, like he'd forgotten what to do with them. As I approached, he looked up. Our eyes met. There was no shock on his face, no confusion, just a flicker of something that might have been relief. He stood up. "You're early," he said. My heart lurched. I hadn't been told not to speak to him, but I also hadn't been told that I could. "I'm following the schedule," I said carefully. He nodded, like that confirmed something for him. "Yeah," he said. "They do that." I didn't ask who they were. I was suddenly afraid of how easily that word fit between us. "You shouldn't be here," he added. "Not like this." "Like what?" "Visible." My phone vibrated. "Deviation detected," the message said. "Maintain route." "I have to go," I said, already stepping past him. He reached out, not to grab me, just to touch my sleeve. His hand was shaking. "They told me you'd be ready soon," he said quietly. I didn't believe them. I pulled away. "What are you talking about?" I asked. His expression shifted then. Not fear. Not anger. Resignation. "Ask them what the backup is for," he said. "Ask them what happens when the primary stops complying." I walked away before he could say anything else. My legs felt disconnected from my body, like I was watching myself move from a distance. The rest of the walk passed in a blur. I didn't look back. As soon as I got home, I sent a message through the work channel. "I had contact with the subject," I typed. This wasn't disclosed. The reply came almost immediately. Contact was anticipated. My hands trembled over the keyboard. "He knows about me," I wrote. "He said things that suggest." "That suggests stress," they interrupted. "Which is expected." I stared at the screen. "What is this really?" I typed. "What am I backing up?" There was a longer pause this time, long enough that I thought they might not answer at all. Then the message appeared. Continuity. That was it. No elaboration. I sat back in my chair and tried to think clearly. Continuity of what? A job? A life? A pattern? I opened the schedule again, scrolling further than I had before. At the very bottom, beneath sections I'd never noticed, there was a tab I hadn't clicked. Failure scenarios. My chest tightened as I opened it. It wasn't dramatic. No warnings. No red text. Just a list. Non-compliance. Degradation. Identity drift. Public inconsistency. Then, under a heading labeled resolution, a single line repeated over and over like a template. Backup assumes role. Primary is phased out. Phased out. I thought about his tired eyes, his shaking hand. I thought about the way the schedule had started to feel more natural to me than my own habits. I typed another message. Does he know he's being phased out? The reply was immediate. He has known for some time, they wrote. That knowledge is part of the process. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This sounds like replacement, I typed. You said I wouldn't be replacing him. Another pause. Then, you are not replacing him, they wrote. You are preserving him. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. How? I asked. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, the message came through. By continuing him when he no longer can. I stared at the words until they blurred. In that moment, everything before snapped into focus. The mirroring. The calibration. The silence. The control. This wasn't about filling in temporarily. It was about overlap, about running two versions of the same person at once until one became unnecessary. I wasn't a backup file. I was a live transfer. My phone buzzed again. Escalation phase complete, the message said. Integration begins. I dropped the phone onto the couch like it was hot. Through the window, I could see the street. A man walked past at the exact pace listed in my schedule. My pace. He didn't look up. I realized then that I didn't know which of us was being observed anymore. And worse than that, I wasn't sure which one of us was already failing. Integration didn't feel like a takeover. It felt like maintenance. That was the most disturbing part. Nothing dramatic happened after the message. No sudden loss of control. No blackout. No confrontation. The schedule just tightened. The margins disappeared completely. Every action now had a confirmation tag beside it. Breathing cadence. Blink rate during screen use. Micro pauses between words when speaking aloud, even if no one was there. I stopped trying to resist. Not because I agreed, but because resistance required energy I didn't have anymore. That night, I received a new instruction. Shared exposure. An address appeared beneath it. It wasn't his apartment. I knew that now. I'd memorized the exterior without meaning to. This was somewhere else. A public place. I arrived exactly on time. It was a small cafe that stayed open late. Dim lighting. Quiet. Mostly empty at this hour. The kind of place people used when they didn't want to be seen, but didn't want to be alone. He was already there. Same bench seat posture I'd seen before. Same neutral jacket. Same tired face. But something about him had changed. He looked delayed. Like his reactions were half a second behind his body. He smiled when he saw me, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. You came, he said. I was told to, I replied. He nodded. Yeah? That sounds right. We sat across from each other. No barrier this time. No glass, no street, no passing moment. Up close, the resemblance was worse. Not physical similarity. We didn't look alike. It was behavioral. The way he held his cup, the way he exhaled before speaking, the way he glanced slightly to the left when thinking. All things I now did without realizing. They've been accelerating you, he said. Not a question. Yes. He laughed quietly. I remember when they did that to me. The word hit harder than I expected. Me. You were a backup too? I asked. He shook his head. No. I was the first successful continuity subject. I waited for him to explain. They didn't start with backups, he continued. They started with preservation. High-functioning people. People whose absence would cause friction. I thought about the schedule's obsession with public consistency. Absence from what? I asked. He gestured vaguely around us. From themselves. I frowned. They monitor patterns, he said. Work output, social presence, communication tone. If someone starts to drift too far from their established self, it creates instability. People notice. Employers notice. Systems notice. So you were corrected? At first, he said. Gently. Suggestions. Coaching. Structure. And when that stopped working, he looked at me then, really looked at me. They don't let the pattern die, he said. They let the person do it instead. My phone vibrated on the table between us. Neither of us looked at it. They told me you'd help, he said softly. That seeing you would motivate me to realign. Is it? I asked. He hesitated. No, he said. It just made it clear. Clear about what? That I'm already obsolete. The words sat heavy between us. I checked the message. Engagement duration exceeded. Prepare for handoff. Handoff? My throat tightened. What happens to you? I asked. He smiled again. This time, there was relief in it. I get to stop, he said. That wasn't an answer. They won't kill you, I said, trying to anchor myself to logic. This isn't. No, he agreed. They won't kill me. He leaned back in his seat. They'll just stop maintaining me. I didn't understand at first. Then I thought about how carefully every part of my day was now managed. How much effort went into keeping the pattern intact. What happens when they stop? I asked. He shrugged. I drift. I miss messages. I forget appointments. I say the wrong things at the wrong time. My performance degrades. And then, he said, everyone slowly agrees I've changed. The idea settled into place with quiet horror. No disappearance. No event. Just erosion. They already started, he added. You probably didn't notice. Small delays. Missed calls. Friends assuming I'm busy. Co-workers compensating. I thought of the schedule noting public inconsistency as a failure scenario. You're being phased out socially, I said. Yes, he replied. And you're being phased in. My phone vibrated again. Please conclude interaction. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I don't want this, I said. There has to be a way to stop it. He stood too, slower than me. There was, he said, for me. What happened? I hesitated. The simplicity of that answer terrified me. They need overlap, he continued. They need the continuity to be seamless. If the backup resists too much, the system compensates by accelerating decay in the primary. I stared at him. You're telling me my resistance is hurting you. He nodded once. That's how they ensure cooperation. I felt trapped in a logic loop I couldn't break. If I complied, I replaced him. If I resisted, I destroyed him faster. My phone buzzed a third time. Return to baseline. Integration at 78%. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. They didn't plan for empathy, he said. That's the flaw. I unfolded the paper when I got home. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't instructions. It was a list. Dates. Times. Small deviations he'd deliberately introduced when he first realized what was happening. Skipped a walk. Delayed a reply. Changed a phrase in an email. Micro errors he'd written at the bottom. Too small to flag individually. Enough to poison the model over time. My heart started to race. If the system relied on pattern purity, then contamination mattered. My phone buzzed. Rest period. I lay down at the assigned time, staring into the dark. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel afraid. I felt focused. If continuity was the goal, then corruption was the weapon. And tomorrow, I would decide which version of this person deserved to survive. I didn't sleep. I lay still during the rest period, eyes closed, breathing regulated, letting the system believe everything was normal. When the morning block began, I followed the schedule exactly for the first hour. Then I introduced my first error. It was small. I buttered my toast with my left hand instead of my right. The schedule didn't specify hands, but the model inferred preferences. I knew that now. I imagined a tiny blip somewhere, a value nudged just out of alignment. No message came. I continued. During the shower, I adjusted the water temperature by a fraction. Barely perceptible. I held it there for exactly 10 seconds, then returned it to baseline. Still nothing. At 9:30, during the first work session, I reread an email before sending it. That mattered. The original always sent emails quickly, confidently. Minimal revision. I introduced a pause. Not long enough to be suspicious. Just long enough to change the rhythm. My phone buzzed. Minor variance detected. I smiled. Variance wasn't failure. Over the next few hours, I layered the errors carefully, the way he had described. Never enough to trigger a correction. Never enough to force intervention. A word choice here, a slightly different posture there. A breath held a fraction too long before speaking aloud during a calibration check. The system responded by tightening constraints. New confirmations appeared. Subtle nudges. It was trying to pull me back. I let it. Then I pulled away again. By early afternoon, the schedule had begun to contradict itself. One instruction asked for silence. Another requested vocal confirmation. A posture note conflicted with a movement requirement. The model was adjusting in real time, trying to reconcile data that no longer agreed. My phone rang. The familiar number. I answered. The voice was still mine, but there was something wrong with it now. A flatness. A delay. State your current task, it said. Working, I replied. Clarify, the voice said. I waited a beat too long. Thinking, I said. Silence. That wasn't in the model. Backup integrity is fluctuating, the voice said finally. I didn't correct it. What happens if I fail? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Continuity risk increases, the voice said. For who? I asked. The line went dead. An hour later, a new message appeared. Primary subject degradation accelerating. I stared at it, my chest tight. They were pushing back. I remembered what he'd said. Resistance in the backup accelerated decay in the primary. They were trying to force my hand. I opened the folded paper again, reading his notes one more time. At the bottom, beneath the list, there was something I hadn't noticed before. A final deviation. Stop mirroring entirely. I stood up. The schedule screamed at me in quiet text. Sit. Pause. Correct. I ignored it. I walked to the window and looked out at the street without timing my gaze. I let my shoulders slump in a way that felt natural, not specified. I rubbed my face with both hands. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Deviation detected. Return to baseline. Immediate correction required. I didn't comply. Instead, I picked up my keys and left the apartment. No route. No pace. No confirmation. Outside, the world felt strangely loud. Unfiltered. Unmanaged. Halfway down the block, I saw him. He was standing on the sidewalk, looking lost. Really lost this time? He saw me and blinked slowly, like it took effort to process what he was seeing. They're letting me go, he said. His voice was unsteady, but it was his. They're shifting resources, he continued. I can feel it. My phone vibrated again. Critical threshold approaching. I looked at him. You don't have to disappear, I said. But I can't keep doing this. He studied my face, searching for something. They won't maintain both of us, he said. I know. A strange calm settled over him. Then this is the handoff, he said. No, I replied. It's the end. I took a step back. Then another. I broke eye contact and kept walking. Behind me, I heard him call my name. Not his name. Mine. I didn't turn around. My phone buzzed one last time. Continuity failure confirmed. Then nothing. No more messages. No more calls. No more corrections. The silence felt heavier than any instruction had. Over the next few days, my life unraveled in small, ordinary ways. I missed deadlines. I forgot to reply to messages. I showed up late without explanation. People noticed. They asked if I was okay. I told them I was tired. Across the city, he faded too, not erased. Just dimmed. We crossed paths once more, weeks later by accident. He looked older. So did I. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Whatever system had built us into patterns moved on. Found new candidates. New backups. I'm writing this now because the strangest part isn't what they did. It's how easy it was to participate. How comforting it felt to let something else decide who I was supposed to be. If you're reading this and something in it feels uncomfortably familiar, pay attention to that. Routines can be useful. Optimization can feel like safety. But if someone ever tells you they're preserving you by taking control, understand this. Continuity doesn't mean survival. Sometimes it just means replacement, slow enough that no one panics. Including you.